Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. This month we are looking at the impact the pandemic and the subsequent shutdown of large parts of the normal economy have had on charitable organizations not working directly with pandemic relief. We'll take this in three parts. Up first, I'll speak to Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker about the organization's Charitable Foundation and how it has fared over the past year. Then we'll talk with Burlington Relay for Life Coordinator Nikki Platowicz about how the relay was impacted last year and the plans for a modified event this year. Finally, we'll talk to Burlington WomenAid member Corey Barkley about the work of that organization, how they have been faring during the pandemic, and what may be in store for the future. We have a lot to get to, so let's get started. I'm now joined by Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker, who's going to talk to us about how the Chamber's charitable organization has, tried to make do over the last year of the pandemic. Rick, thanks for taking some time and coming on today.
Happy to be here, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Let's just start out, just talk about in general about the Chamber's charitable organization. Who's part of it? How does it work?
Well, the charitable partnership program we have through the Charitable Foundation, we look to local charitable organizations that really could use some help, not only in some funding, but sweat equity and some marketing. We also, through our Charitable Foundation, support the Burlington High School Scholarship Program. And what we do is we hold a couple of large events during the year, which are the sole focus and methods for us to gain these funds to be able to handle and pass on to these charities. And it's really done some great work here locally in the town.
Yeah, so a couple of the organizations include, I know the Skate for the 22, which supports, veterans and sort of mental health. You have WomenAid, other organizations, People Helping People, Help Us. Well, who else is part of it?
Yeah, the Burlington Education Foundation, Neurofibromatosis Northeast, the UDT SEAL Association, all of the organizations that we handle have a strong Burlington connection, whether they're a grassroots campaign that's strictly in Burlington or some great Burlington citizens that have donated their time and effort to help promote these charities. And through the sources throughout the chamber, we're able to hold events and raise money and bring awareness to some of these organizations that might not otherwise be known.
Right, and I think that what you just said is the key thing. You're able to hold events and raise funds. So, since last March when everything kind of shut down, what has been the impact to these organizations from your perspective?
Well, certainly as a business organization, and just as a general rule overall, everyone was impacted in dramatic fashion, through the pandemic. As you know, Burlington, we have a large daytime population that we depend on not only economically but also for their involvement in charities and just helping support those that may be less fortunate than themselves. So our organization was drastically hit. Again, without being able to have events, we're not able to raise funds or the awareness. But it's really been the impact of people not being here during the day, not being in the offices and talking with each other and collaborating on support for the community that's really, hurt these organizations. If you couple that with some of the political climate that's gone on in the last year, some of the larger issues, whether they be globally or nationally, some of the inequities, racial inequities, people have been able to focus more on some of the larger things they can do remotely, and it's the local charities that really have been left by the wayside, and we're trying to get that going again as people come back to the office and we're able to get that awareness and remember that charity begins at home and it begins locally as well.
Yeah, do you find that, obviously people have been trying to move things online, do virtual events, but do you find the lack of sort of that person to person, sharing food, sharing a drink kind of, impacts just how well these sort of events play out and, or how effective they are?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there, Rich. One of the things with the pandemic, it's impacted everybody. Everyone has their own day-to-day challenges, whether it be financial challenges, there's people that are out of work, especially in our area in the restaurant and hospitality industry. Those are key people that get involved with the community. Those are what we call people. And without them being here and without that communication and those talks over lunch on how to get involved with the community, people go remote, and sometimes that connection to community gets severed. And we're certainly seeing that here in our area as well.
Yeah, it definitely feels different. There's something sort of special about being able to actually gather in groups and sort of go over things and just sort of have that human connection that is a little bit lacking. I feel it with you right now, but
I think
it's not always the case over Zoom calls.
Right, and people have been affected, health-wise. People are stressed and they're scared in many cases about going out. So those normal connections that may have brought about the collaboration to get together and join an organization or support an organization has really been impacted.
And one of the other things that I was thinking about as far as impact, some organizations I imagine are actually doing pretty well as far as their fundraising because they're sort of directly tied to the relief of the pandemic. Food banks I think are doing pretty well, things like that. But organizations that are not related to anything to do with COVID or the direct economic impact, I think probably are the ones that are being sort of left out to dry. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I agree, Rich. There's certainly food stability to people is a key thing, and I do want to mention that as we're getting started again, we've just received a very generous donation from AFC Urgent Care, and Dave Adams through AFC Urgent Care. He really wanted to help make sure that people have food security, but also at the same time wanted to make sure that local small businesses would be the benefactors of that. So we're now partnering with some local restaurants and a couple of organizations I'm not able to divulge right now, but it will support the small businesses and some smaller restaurants to help provide food to some of these families to supplement what they're receiving. Because for most of us, getting a pizza is not a big thing. For other families that have been locked inside, it's a major thing. But also to make sure that that people are being contacted and we're reaching out to them and getting acclimated again. So I want to thank Dave Adams and AFC Urgent Care for seeing that need and stepping up immediately.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. But like I was saying, I think people helping people, I think their donations have been pretty strong. But there's things like Skate for the 22, which is an organization that deals with something not at all connected to a pandemic. People don't make that direct association. So I'm thinking that those type of charitable organizations might have had a difficult time this year because they're not front and center in people's mind. Everybody's so focused on pandemics.
Yeah, that organization specifically, they're dealing with trying to prevent suicide from veterans. We all have received more stress lately than we normally see, and the therapeutic method that they were able to do is to get veterans playing hockey, get them back in that locker room atmosphere, get them out and reconnected and keep an eye on each other. And obviously with the shutdown, all of that got put on hold. So there's there's much more of an outreach that's going on through that organization, Bobby Collett and his staff, to make sure that they stay in touch with people. But again, on the list of the pecking order, when you think of, who do we have to take care of first, I think people do think of food and shelter, which is absolutely incredibly important, but there are organizations taking care of that. So now we're looking to try to fill in those gaps in organizations like Skate for the 22, as you mentioned.
Right. Yeah. So like in another part of another segment of this show, we talked to Nikki from the Burlington Relay for Life, and obviously everybody's focused on COVID this year, but I mean cancer is still definitely an issue that has to be addressed. So just because we all are hyper focused on what's going on immediately in front of us, there's other organizations, other causes that are just as important as they were before March of 2020.
Yeah, and Rich, one of the things that we've been talking to people about with the stimulus package that just came out. Now, we're not saying that you can take that stimulus and write checks to organizations, but you certainly can support them by spending your money at local businesses, whether it be supplies that people need. I mean, there are organizations here like Help Us that tries to fill the gaps on what the government is supplying and what other organizations are supplying, meeting the needs of, whether it's clothing, toys, things like this. There can be a win-win that people can continue to support the local organizations and support the local businesses at the same time until they can get back to that, hand-to-hand, face-to-face support that they they're in such dire need for.
Right. And as we kind of, start wrapping up here, looking ahead, obviously vaccines are out, people are getting them. You mentioned, right now the Chamber is working with AFC Urgent Care with some local businesses. Are you seeing, things sort of reopening, reemerging? Do you expect to be able to have some events coming up, maybe not in the near future, but the mid-future?
Yeah, I do think, certainly the government's doing a great job on the pandemic vaccination program right now. It's going at a pretty good pace after a slow start. The general feeling out there now is people are starting to feel better. We do see that, not only is the light at the end of the tunnel, it's just around the corner. And there is a pent-up demand for people to, get reconnected with coworkers. While their work from home has been great for, processing the transactions and keeping the wheels of the businesses running, it's that cultural connection that's missing, and the charitable organizations are the ones that really depend on that cultural connection. So we're looking forward to getting it back to whatever the new normal is, certainly sooner than later, and we do see it just around the corner, to be honest, Rich.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And once again, I just want to thank you for all the work that you do, one, with the charitable organization, and two, for taking some time today and chatting with us about, how this last year has impacted, that part of the Chamber's operations.
Well, thanks for having me on, Rich. And I do look back to the better times that are shortly ahead and getting these charities back in front of people, because it truly is a win-win situation. The people really feel good when they're able to help others, and the charities really appreciate it.
Yes, well, we got to get your black tie gala back up and running, so.
We're working on it, Rich.
Well, thank you again, and I'm sure we'll be checking in with you as things are reopening and businesses are getting back up into high gear. So it's good to have you back, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
We go now to my conversation with Burlington Relay for Life coordinator Nikki Platowicz about how Relay was impacted and what they are planning for this year. And I am now joined by Nikki Platowicz from Burlington Relay for Life. We're going to talk about her experience last year and what they are planning on this year. Nikki, thanks for taking some time and joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's a pleasure.
And so let's just start off, obviously 2020 was a strange year. What happened with Relay for Life, or Burlington Relay for Life, last spring and summer?
Thank you for asking. So we usually prepare Burlington Relay for Life well in advance. We usually start the fall before. So we were doing normal preparations up until about February or March when COVID first arose. So it was really difficult in trying to prepare a Relay for Life, not knowing whether it would be in person or virtual. We received news around mid-March that we were going to have a virtual event, and without really having any precedent to go off, we really just kind of had to scramble to figure out what we wanted to do, what type of platform we wanted to do, and how we would be moving forward in executing that plan. So we ended up doing a virtual Relay for Life event through Facebook, with different videos and social media posts, and doing it that way. This year for 2021, we hope to have our virtual relay via Zoom. We hope that the Zoom platform would be more interactive and engaging compared to the Facebook platform that we had used last year.
And overall, sticking with last year for a second, what kind of impact did the pandemic have on just your ability to fundraise?
It had a huge impact on our ability to fundraise. Before COVID-19, Burlington Relay for Life typically raised around $100,000. But in light of COVID-19, people were facing some challenging times. A lot of people may have been diagnosed with COVID-19 or have had family or friends diagnosed with COVID-19. A lot of people suffered employment challenges, whether they have been laid off or furloughed or even just working from home. So it was really difficult for people to fundraise like they would have in the past. We also relied a lot on local businesses to sponsor us or to fundraise or to even donate things, which of course is difficult when people are suffering financially in their own homes. But of course, fundraising is especially important now more than ever during COVID-19. The way things are going right now, the American Cancer Society risks facing about 50% cut in cancer research if the trends continue, which is why it's so important now to fundraise so we can help continue saving lives and leading the fight in a world without cancer.
Yeah, and to that end, what are some of the things that are happening this year with Burlington Relay for Life?
So this year we have been trying to do monthly fundraisers to get people engaged and to help in our fundraising efforts. So for example, last weekend, F45 Training Southwest in Burlington had hosted our kickoff event. So it was a 1-hour workout training. And F45 Training donated back 100% of the proceeds back to Relay. And moving forward, we are hoping to have more monthly fundraisers to continue our fundraising efforts and encourage people to get more involved in Relay.
Now, you mentioned people working from home. I think people are working online a lot more. Have you noticed, any change in the way you're able to connect with people through, social media? Are more people sort of engaging because they are spending so much more time, in that online space?
Most certainly. Before COVID-19, most of our engagement efforts were in person. We would host monthly meetings. Our event leadership team would be out in the community, engaging with people face to face. We would also be going out to local businesses and talking to people that way. But of course, with a virtual setting, it's much more difficult to do that and maintain that natural human interaction through a screen. Mm-hmm. And naturally, with people working from home or doing virtual schooling, I'm sure a lot of people are exhausted from being behind a screen for several hours at a time. So it's much more difficult to encourage people to engage in relay activities virtually because they're spending so much more of their time online now.
Right, so it's actually the inverse. Like maybe before there would have been a novelty to do some virtual event, and now it sort of feels too much like work.
Exactly.
And as sort of things are kind of opening up a little bit more, obviously, than the tight shutdown that we were in during when Relay would have happened last year? Are you getting any better response this year from local businesses, in their ability to, make donations or provide, raffle items, things like that?
Yeah, as I was talking about earlier, it's much more difficult to ask people because, of course, it's all virtual. So you're asking people through a screen, so it's not as warm as it normally would be when we would be engaging with others. So that's been really difficult.
And what kind of challenges have you found? I know, obviously, with organizations like Relay, it's important to sort of keep yourself in people's minds, as throughout the year. So like when it comes time that they're deciding where to make their donations, that you come to mind. Has it been harder to sort of kind of just keep in connection with people and keep Relay for Life as sort of front and center?
Yes, it's been very difficult, especially since COVID-19, I feel like has been the front and center of many people's efforts. So I'm hoping that people can remember Relay for Life, because I feel like before COVID-19, Burlington Relay for Life was such an important community event, and I just hope that we keep that at the forefront of our minds moving forward. Like I was saying earlier, it's very difficult to get people engaged, but I'm hoping, like you said, with the restrictions starting to loosen up a little bit more, that people might be a little more willing to be engaged and participate. Of course, with the numbers going up, we're hoping to have some sort of small interaction if Burlington allows us to, which is still in the process of being negotiated. But we still would like to have something, whether it's just a little drive-by or something like that, just to get people out and about, because it's really difficult to engage people when everything's just behind a screen.
Yeah, I would say it must be, particularly difficult because, I've been to a number of Relay for Lifes, and I think, beyond just the importance of, the battle against cancer, I think one of the ways that they are so successful is that it's a real community event. It's a coming together, there's all the ceremonies. How are you, at least attempting to try to recreate some of that sort of community feeling in an online space?
The way we're trying to maintain the community feel is that we're trying to ask everyone who has participated in the past to participate again this year, and to encourage their family and friends to participate as well. So people are encouraged to create teams or to join teams that they have participated in the past. And we're also encouraging people just to share our message. I feel like it's very difficult to even start conversations sometimes, just because the virtual setting isn't as natural as the human face-to-face interaction is. So it's a little more difficult to even just bring it up in a conversation naturally like you would in person.
Yeah, and we were talking beforehand, about the virtual Relay for Life that you have planned. Talk about some of the details. What can people expect? I know you're still planning on having some of the, the same ceremonies that you would have in person. So what can people expect if they, log in and participate?
So typically our Relay for Life event is a 12-hour overnight event. But of course, with a virtual setting, that's not very feasible. So decided to have it on Saturday, June 12th from 1 to 5 p.m. We're trying to be cognizant of everyone's schedules as well. So we're still maintaining tradition in the sense of, having an opening ceremony, remembering and celebrating all of our cancer survivors and those that have lost their lives to cancer. We also would love to hear from some caregivers as well. We also encourage people to start their opening lap from home and, do a lap in their local community, wherever that may be. We also are planning on maintaining a luminaria ceremony. So traditionally in the past, we usually read a poem, and we also line the track with luminaria bags to remember those who have fought and lost their lives to cancer. So we're hoping to maintain that tradition again this year by reading a poem. And we're also hoping that people will decorate luminaria bags that we can share in a presentation during relay. And then for closing ceremony, it would be the same thing as always, thanking those that participated, and thanking all of our sponsors. And then in typical Relay for Life events, we usually have fun on-site campus fundraisers, if you will. Of course, that's challenging in a virtual setting. So the way we're trying to simulate that in a virtual setting is by having fun things spread throughout. We're still in the works of figuring out like a particular schedule, but we're hoping to have like maybe some trivia or some bingo, or some fun cooking classes mixed in between, to try to give that same feel as if people were walking around and engaging in activities in person.
And what's sort of like the interface? I know you said it's Zoom, but if people want to make donations throughout the event, is it going to be a GoFundMe, or what can people expect as far as just what they're going to need to do to fully participate and support you?
Of course. So the easiest way to donate would be directly on our Relay for Life page. That's www.relayforlife.org/BurlingtonMA. We also have a very easy fundraising app. It's fun, capitalized, fundraising with ACS. It's a very easy app to download. You would just use your basic login information like you would to participate. And it's very easy. You can use checks, credit cards, and if people have cash, they can always mail that in as well. But in my personal opinion, I feel like the app makes it very, very easy to collect donations.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And I just want to talk a little bit, so we talked about the importance of fundraising, but talk about where some of those funds go. Like how does Relay for Life help in the fight against cancer?
As I reiterated earlier, a majority of our funds go towards cancer research, which is so important in helping continuing to save lives, and leading the fight in a world without cancer. Our funds also go towards our 24/7 helpline. So that helpline is geared towards helping survivors and families with cancer diagnoses and gaining more information about their particular form of cancer, and other resources as well, such as local hospitals, therapy groups, things of that nature. Prior to COVID-19, we also had a Hope Lodge. The closest one here in Massachusetts is at Jamaica Plain. The Hope Lodge would house cancer survivors and their families during cancer treatments if they lived too far away from their particular hospital. And we also, prior to COVID-19, were doing free cancer rides for cancer patients that didn't have transportation to hospitals.
Right, so it's a wide variety of activities, both supporting the research and supporting patients directly. So, I think everybody agrees that the American Cancer Society does some really good work. So just kind of as we get close to wrapping up, you mentioned the website, but I know you also have social media. Where can people kind of follow along and keep up to date with all the activities that you have coming up?
Of course. I would encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook. It's Burlington Relay for Life. I would also encourage everyone to follow us on Instagram as well, at Burlington RFL. And we also keep updates on our normal, www.relayforlife.org page. So there's always updates being made to that page about new fundraisers that we're doing and other ways to get involved.
And I guess kind of last thing, people could be watching, and obviously this year there's a a lot of push and pull between different organizations trying to raise funds. I don't want to say it's a competition, but people have limited resources and there's a lot of needs. Just talk about the importance of in this moment where I think the focus has shifted to the pandemic, the need to sort of continue to support cancer research.
Of course. In light of COVID-19, like I reiterated earlier, the fundraising is so important, like I said, because cancer survivors are more susceptible, generally speaking, to contracting COVID-19 due to their impacted immune system. And it's also very important to keep cancer in mind because so many people have been impacted by it, whether it be individually, a family member, or a friend. So just because COVID-19 has kind of taken over, if you will, cancer hasn't gone away, and nor it will not go away either. People will continue to be diagnosed, and people will continue to fight their cancer battles, regardless of everything else that's going on in the world. So I think it's really important to keep cancer in mind, in the sense that millions of people are impacted by this every year, and they will continue to do so. And I would really love to see the same fight against COVID-19 for the fight against cancer as well. If everyone can work as hard together as a community to fight against COVID-19, I know we can come together as a community to fight cancer.
Well said. Well, Nikki, Burlington Relay for Life, I really appreciate you taking some time and talking about the challenges of fundraising during a pandemic, and also about Burlington Relay for Life and letting people know how they can get involved. I think it's an important organization, and I appreciate the work that you're doing to keep it going.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate your time.
Finally, we have my conversation with Corey Barkley from Burlington Women Aid about that organization, the impact the pandemic has had on it, and what they are looking at moving into the future. I am now joined by Corey Barkley of Burlington Women Aid. Corey, thanks for taking some time and talking to us about this today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And we'll start out, pretty basic. You want to just kind of explain Burlington Women Aid and some of the activities that you're engaged in?
Sure. So Burlington Women Aid was started about 10 years ago by a group of women in town, myself included. We now have 8 women on the board. All of our events are open to the public. For the first 9 years, all of our events were in person, where we would get together with a group of people, raising money for a specific family. Generally, the family was from the town of Burlington, but sometimes the families live in a surrounding community. And then the past year, we've obviously had to change our fundraising model quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so we had to adjust, much like the teachers did. And we changed our events. We also changed the way that we fundraise and who we fundraise for, because we realized that there was a need in town. Many families were struggling to, just afford some basic necessities. And so instead of raising money for 4 specific families this year, we actually opened up our fundraising to more families and were able to offer grants. So we actually offered grants to over 125 local families this year.
Wow.
Which was a little bit different. So we had to raise some money in a different way.
Right. So normally pre-pandemic, you would, take on the cause of one specific family and sort of fundraise around, whatever their need was.
Yes. Yeah. And we still did that a little bit this year, but in addition to raising money for a number of families, specifically, we also raised money for many families. So for example, over the past month, we've had a March raffle calendar. And we raised close to $10,000 raffling off an item. Basically, generally it was money, like a $100 Visa gift card or a gift certificate to a local restaurant. And these are things that we couldn't have done without the support of everybody in the community, and lots of businesses coming together and offering their support as well. So that's one thing that we've done. We had local people in town offer to run raffles for us. where they would raffle something specific and then give us all of the proceeds. So there's been like a ton of community involvement.
Yeah, it sounds like people have really kind of stood up during this difficult, period that we've been going through.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. And I live and work in Burlington, and to be honest, I didn't really understand the level of need that some of the families in town would have when there was a crisis or a pandemic. So it's really interesting to see how many people really did need support and would reach out, and people who didn't feel comfortable reaching out had other families reaching out for them. And so the process to, apply for a grant, it doesn't need to be the family applying for the grant. It could be a friend of the family or a family member of the family.
Okay, so I was actually just about to ask you how you identified, what families were in need and what their need was. So it can be like a referral system.
Yeah, I'd say 75 or more % of the families we hear about is just word of mouth, either, from a board member or somebody emailing us and saying, hey, I heard a friend of mine may need some support, a family member is ill, or they had a fire in their home, or, whatever the situation is, we usually hear through word of mouth. But with regards to the COVID support and the grants, we reached out to other organizations in town. So we reached out to Help Us, we reached out to the food pantry, and we had all of them handing out flyers from us, so that essentially what was happening was that all the families that needed support were gaining support, not only from the food pantry and from Help Us, but they were also getting support from me and from Women Aid, from our organization as well.
And when the pandemic struck, were there certain sources of income that you normally had that disappeared, or was it a big disruption?
It was actually the opposite. We
Okay.
had an outpouring of support from people in town wanting to help out families, and realizing, they were still working. So, hey, I still have my job and I'm still working, but I know that there's so many people that aren't working right now, either because they need to be home with their kids or they've been laid off, or a lot of people just kind of reaching out and saying, I want to do something and help out another family because I'm doing okay financially. And in the past, in previous years, for all the years we've been running Women Aid, when we had one event for a family, that was kind of the only event we had for them. And what we realized when we were doing virtual events, that they weren't quite as lucrative. We weren't raising as much money for our virtual events. And we got so lucky because so many organizations reached out to us and said, oh, that's okay. We'll have another event for you. So instead of having one event for one family, we would have 2 virtual events per family that we were raising money for. And so we did some events. Stump Trivia is one that did a virtual event with us that was really popular. Flatbread Pizza Company, we do an event with them every year. And this year, instead of eating in, it was just takeout, but we still did really well. A Whole Bunch Flowers did a virtual flower making event with us that was really popular. Sweet Pea Parties, which is run by Jacqueline McKinnon in town. She ran 3 different craft nights for us.
Wow.
And I know that she did it at a huge discount to herself. The Effortless Kitchen by Debbie Brosnan. She did a virtual cooking class for us. And Courtney Fine with Sweet Balance Yoga did a virtual yoga class. So we had so many people reaching out to us and saying hey, we'll do virtual events and at a huge discount.
Well,
Some
awesome.
of them didn't even charge us at all for anything. So,
Well, it's good to hear that, despite, because I know a lot of the businesses, especially the smaller businesses in town, were pretty heavily impacted. So the fact that they are still willing to reach out and do what they can is, pretty inspiring.
yeah, it's been quite a year for sure.
And what kind of, lessons or takeaways have you learned about, how to operate sort of, in a different type of environment, a different type of way?
I think that, and we started doing this before the pandemic hit, but I think that working together as a community with other nonprofits in town has been super helpful and really important. I think joining other organizations, and we're part of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce, We're also part of the Burlington Equity Coalition. We've just sort of decided that maybe joining these other organizations will really help us to grow our organization and help us to be able to, I guess, just reach out and help more people locally. So,
yeah, you mentioned growing the organization. How big is Woman Aid, and like who's some of the people, or the type of person that is part of the group?
So it's not really like a group like that. It's hard to explain, but basically there's 8 women on the board. And then other than that, anyone can be part of Women Aid. So it's not like we have 100 people that are just like a part of Women Aid. We have whoever shows up at any event, that's who is part of Women Aid. So, we had close to 500 donations for our March calendar raffle. So maybe there's like 500 people that are part of that event. When we used to have in-person events, I'd say we averaged between 40 and 50 people per event, but it's not always the same 40 or 50 people.
Gotcha.
So there's not like a standard number of people, and there's not like a cutoff. Everybody that wants to join can join.
Excellent. And now, so the vaccine is being rolled out, things are opening up a little bit more. How do you see, Women Aid going forward into the future?
That's a good question. So our 10-year anniversary is on Wednesday next week.
Oh, wow.
And we have decided to do a few different things. So for one, we're keeping things safe for now. So one thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be selling cookies through Brianna Aperzizi. She is a local baker, so she'll be making cookies specifically for us as a fundraiser. We're going to be selling bumper magnets for cars. And then we were also in contact with Third Ave. And Third Ave has some events that they do, sometimes like on the green near the restaurants, and like kind of by Austrianino, but they also do these events there where they call them like Sunday Burn. I've never done them before, but basically it's like a number of weekends where they have people working out outside.
I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah. And so generally they do those events, and then they'll have like 4 different weekends will be considered one event for one specific place. And so their May and June event is going to be for Women Aid. So that's going to essentially be our first attempt at doing something outside and in person in over a year with them.
Oh, that sounds exciting. And, as sort of things open up even more, do you expect that, just from the lessons learned from the last year that, you might keep some of the more online fundraising going, or do you expect to try to fully get back to the way things were beforehand, or are there things that you can sort of take away from this that you think might help improve the organization?
It's a good question. I think everyone's goal maybe is to just get back to normal. And so I'd like to think that eventually we'll just only have in-person events, because that's what we had in the past. But I don't think it's a bad idea to think about keeping some virtual events. A few people have reached out to us and said that they love our virtual events. They're more introverted, and the virtual events are more comfortable for them, and that they never came to our in-person events because that would be, hard for them, create anxiety for them being in an in-person setting. So I do think that we've reached different people having virtual events. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a couple each year. They're definitely easy for us. I mean, we don't have to leave our houses.
No, yeah, that's true. Just like for this interview.
Yeah. So I think it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future, because I think for me, at least, and the women on the board, the main point of Women Aid in general is to get together with people and to, socialize while raising money. And so socializing virtually is really different than socializing in person. And so I guess we'll have to see where things lead.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that like you said, some people only came to the virtual ones because of shyness. And I think this last year has sort of taught us different modes of doing things and sort of, just kind of shown us all what's sort of possible to adapt to. So just a couple other questions. Your thoughts, obviously you got an increase in support because of, people wanting to reach out and help. But, there are some organizations that weren't really directly working with, pandemic response. Do you have a thought in just the importance of people kind of keeping an open mind, supporting organizations, even if it's not, directly tied to our current situation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's important to notice and realize that organizations that are local or even more like broader sense, like Boston-based or Massachusetts-based organizations, they're working all the time to help out, families or individuals that need assistance. And I think just knowing that those organizations are out there is important. The pandemic sort of made it so that more people were more aware of what was available. So in one way, that sort of brought to light some of the positive things going on around.
Yeah, it seems like the story of Lemonade during the last year has been a positive one, like a silver lining in an otherwise dark sky, because it's very nice to hear of so many people kind of coming together and making sure that you have the resources you need. So if anybody does want to support you, get involved, where can they find you?
So our website is www.burlingtonmawomenade, and it's spelled WOMENADE.org. And on our website, we have tons of information and also a donate button. So that donate button brings you directly to a PayPal page. So if you don't have PayPal, you can still donate using a credit card. We also have a Venmo account, which is Burlington-Womenade. People seem to love Venmo these days, so that seems to be really helpful to have a Venmo account. And we're always posting new events. We also have a Facebook page, and we're always posting new events on there as well as on our website. And so
excellent.
That's where we are.
And I know you mentioned the activities at 3rd Ave. Anything else coming up that people should keep an eye out for?
Well, we've been having at least one event a month for the past 12 months. So we're taking the summer off.
Okay, fair enough.
So we'll be back in September with some new events, hopefully in person, and maybe a couple virtual as well. But I think after the 3rd Ave weekends, we're going to take a break until September.
Fair. Well, I want to first thank you for all that you do in town and all the the people and family you support, and then secondly for taking some time this afternoon to call in with us and sort of talk about the organization and how the last year has been going.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
All
And
right.
for letting everyone know about Lemonade.
Well, good luck with the event at 3rd Ave and enjoy their much deserved time off until September. And we will talk to you soon.
Thanks.
So there you have it, the impact of the pandemic and economic shutdown on charitable organizations. I'd like to thank my guests, Rick Parker, Nikki Platowicz, and Corey Barkley for joining me this month. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back with another edition of BNews In Depth next month, so stay tuned.